Welcome back to the Tarot series. I know it's been a minute since we've been on this tarot thing, and I apologize for that, but it's been for a good reason, real good reason. So, we're going to talk about the Death card, which I know everybody's afraid of, just like the Devil card. But keep in mind, this is all about change and transformation, maybe actual death, but I can tell you the reason why we went from temperance to this card, and the reason why it took so long is, synchronicities abound, man. Like, I've had synchronicities in my life, and the struggle's been real, for real. And I think it's really crazy about how I talk about each card, and I'm actually going through this stuff. So we are on the path of noon, the Hebrew word noon, which means death, or the 13th key, the 13th tarot key, the 24th path of wisdom. So in the 32 paths of wisdom, the 24th path is the imaginative intelligence. And it's called that because it gives a likeness to all that similitudes which are created in like manner similar to its harmonious elegancies. Now, what does that mean? Well, we'll get into it. First, let's talk about the correspondences of this card, the things that correspond with it, the symbols you want to think about when you pull this card. The path color is green blue. Its related sound is G natural. The sign is Scorpio, which is fixed water. The meaning is fish. The simple letter is movement. And the esoteric meaning is the child of the great transformers, the Lord of the gate of death. Now, we always start out with Robert Wang's interpretations of this stuff because it's my favorite to start out with. But we're going to go through Robert Wang, Lon-Mel Duquette, and Paul Foster Cases, Crowley, all that. We'll go through all of it like we usually do. But once you get done with this video, you should know a great detail about this card. Now, also, in the Tree of Life, this is where we're working now. Okay, so we already went through the cards that go down here, all right, which is, I guess you could say, the Neshama or the first plane or whatever. But now we're into the higher self. We're working around these cards. So all the paths that reside in here, that's where we're into now. So things get a little tougher. Things get a little deeper. And remember, all of the other cards below it are kind of implicit inside these cards. So the higher we go up the tree, I wouldn't say the more powerful, but the bigger the story, because the other cards kind of reside inside them, if that makes any sense. All right. So let's get back to the slide here. All right, so let's get into the studies. So the path of noon, or death, is one of three paths leading from the personality to the higher self. And as a preface to a study, one may usefully consider comments by Paul Foster Case and Crowley. And Case says this: Key 13 tells the secret of secrets, and he who knows the secret has in his hands a power which might be used to overturn the world. Whoa, that's a pretty big statement. Yet no person learns it until he is truly prepared. And more than anything else, this means such ethical preparation that no temptation to misuse this power could ever be sufficient to turn the knower from the path of strictly constructive and beneficent application of the force he is able to control. In other words, when you're ready to know this power, you'll be ready ethically before it'll ever happen. One may also recall Case's statement about the devil, that it's the symbolic veil for the greatest practical secret of occultism. And the devil card was one of the first ones that we did in this series. So as we shall see, the similarity of description for these two cards is no coincidence. Crowley's comments on the card kind of differ. We got to remember too, Crowley's whole method of things is going to be based around Thelema, but there's going to be a lot of similarities. But Crowley comments on the far-reaching implications of this particular card in discussing the fish meanings of it means noon. He says this symbol resumes the whole secret doctrine, the secret of secrets. The great importance of this path is pointed out by its very position on the Tree of Life. It's on the path of the flaming sword between Tiferet and Netzach. meaning that it is the path of emanation of the lower creator energy into matter. It is the path on which the energy of God the Son is transformed into the first sphere, or pattern of energy underlying the material world. In terms of the individual man, this is the path on which the higher self directs the personality downward into incarnation. Think about that. So, this is the path of the energy represented when the higher self pushes itself downward into incarnation. So, the higher self, in a sense, has to die a little to become human. Now, if you consider this on an upward course of personal evolution, it is the path on which the personality energy projected by the higher self is absorbed in physical death or reconceptualized in initiation. So let's pull up the tree here. Now we know the flaming sword here is, if I can get out my straight lines. Do I have my straight lines? Yeah. So we know the flaming sword goes like this. This is the emanating energies from Kether into matter, or like the flaming sword, right? That's how it goes. So, when it comes to where this thing resides, it resides right here, right? I can't really make it. Yeah, right there. So the higher self is beginning to push itself down into matter. That's manifesting from spirit to earth. From earth to spirit, you're kind of like surrendering, or I guess you're being forced to surrender to the transformation. So, yeah. Considered on an upward course of personal evolution, it is the path in which the personality energy projected by the higher self is absorbed in physical death. So when you die, or when you reconceptualize an initiation. So whether it's physical death on an upward, I guess on the upward journey, or you're actually being initiated, this would be you going up the tree, right? So we go up the tree, and like do I have that picture? I don't think I have that picture, but it looks like a snake, right? Manifests down in the sword, but we rise up in that Kundalini snake kind of that touches every path. The great work involves much which could be called psychological reorientation. There's a perceptual change about the nature of reality and about what constitutes the self. And this is one aspect of the, quote, transformation on this path. The transformation involves leaving the desire nature of Netzach, which is that green sphere, and being absorbed into Tifereth. This desire nature is the very essence of the personality, which functions entirely in terms of the satisfaction of its needs and wishes. The very will to live, meaning the desire of the personality to continue to function in the sensory condition, is abrogated on the path of death. Here, the temporary and illusory nature of the personality is correctly self-perceived. The personality undergoes a willful death, surrendering everything that it believes itself to be. And the most difficult thing is that this is the total surrender of life. This initiatory sacrifice must precede the experience of cosmic awareness. One is required to give up the totality of one's being, one's very life, and relative darkness, yet in the faith that there will be a resurrection into the light. As Carl Jung puts it, by descending into the unconscious, the conscious mind puts itself in a perilous condition, for it is apparently extinguishing itself. It is, as Gareth Knight described, a dark night of the soul. Much as on the path of temperance, another of the three paths leading from the personality to the higher self, which we discussed before this one may proceed to the experience of the higher self on any of these paths, but the lessons of all three paths must be mastered. The devil, temperance, and death are different perspectives and aspects of the same thing. All right? The devil, temperance, and death are different perspectives and aspects of the same thing. Temperance being the path of meditation between Ayin and Noon, And this might more easily be understood by considering the idea that the figure of the devil, the angel of temperance, and the skeleton of death are all aspects of the higher self. Encountering such a tightly defined trinity of tarot keys, one may wonder how the universally applicable principle of the Yod He Vav He may relate. In this case, death is Yod, fire, the devil is He, water, and temperance is Vav, air, and the result of the interaction of the other two. The Sefer Yetzirah, of course, speaks of only the Yod, He, and Vav, as applied to these three cards. The Yod, He, and Vav are forces interacting in our own physical vehicle, the He being the final. So it will be seen that while the tree of life has a path called death, there is no opposite path of birth. Now you can explain this in two ways. The first is that the devil, which is enchained in matter, or which enchains us in matter, is in some ways the card of birth. But more important is the fact that both birth and death are essentially the same transition. As one is born into the world, he dies to an inner world. And as one dies to this world, he's born back into the same inner world of origin. So this card represents a symbolic passing through a gateway, which is at once the utter destruction of one phase of energy and the transformation of that energy into something else. Think about this as real energetic transformation, not the steps to it or anything like that, just transformation. But the transformation is directed from above. Thus is the tarot key called the child of the great transformers. It's also the lord of the gates of death. Nun, the Hebrew word nun, is not the great transformers themselves. He is their child. Nun is not death. Rather, he is the keeper of its gates. Herein lies an important principle for the real understanding of this card. It gets deeper. And some other symbolism which may be very helpful is an alchemical one. To this path is attributed putrefaction, the decaying black mass in the crucible which eventually turns into gold. It is the emergence of new life from death. Of the four cards shown, only Crowley suggests this idea. The Crowley, Golden Dawn, and Marseille versions all show the skeleton of death wielding a scythe, a tool of the harvest, which is also a symbol of time, and thus of Saturn too, and Bina, which is the giver and destroyer of life, as we know. But only in Crowley's card does the destructive sweep of the tool also produce bubbles in which new forms of life are seen to be developing. So let's take a look at Crowley's card here. Looks like some bubbles are developing stuff, huh? See that in the background? La Muerte. That is a pretty cool. Crowley's cards is pretty cool. Now, this is the resurrection, which follows the transformation of death. In fact, both Crowley and Mathers attribute the skeleton to Osiris, a god slain and resurrected. Of course, in all cases, the skeleton represents that which remains after the maggots of earth have consumed the flesh. The skeleton is the framework of the organ system and is thus central to growth and fruition. Interestingly enough, as the word nun is a verb, it means to sprout or to grow in Hebrew. In this, we can view the skeleton as a symbolic and perpetual seed. The plant dies in the winter, but not before producing seeds, which will regenerate its image in the spring. The image which carries over is a kind of spiritual skeleton, a pattern unaffected by the transformation of the plant. The plant becomes the seed, which again becomes the plant. This is what is meant by the words of the 32 Paths of Wisdom. It gives a likeness to all the similitudes which are created in like manner, similar to its harmonious elegancies. Now that starts to make sense, right? Meditation on this idea will reveal the ultimate message of the death card, which is rather a distillation of the entire great work, or as Crowley said, of the fish symbol, resumes the whole secret doctrine. Nun in Hebrew means fish. Zadi means fish hook. And while the Sefer Yetzirah relates imagination to Zadi, The latter 32 paths of wisdom calls Nun the imaginative intelligence. To make this symbolism less mysterious, the documents imply that on the path of Zadi, we begin to develop the tools of creative imagination which are required to tread the difficult path of Nun. For example, to make the transition between the personality and the higher self. Again, everything is summed up by the fish symbolism. The fish is a traditional symbol of what the alchemists call first matter, an almost impossible subject to describe, but which is the mind substance of everything that is. Gareth Knight says that the best modern definition is offered by Coleridge in his Primary Imagination. The fish has also, since perhaps the 2nd century AD, been a key symbol of Christianity. In the earliest church of the Eucharist, was not specifically represented, but was implied in a number of innocuous meal scenes. The most common of such scenes was the agape, or friend's meal. Iconographers describe such scenes as fractro panis, which means that bread is broken symbolically. In the earliest agape scenes, several figures are shown around a table with a fish at the center. This fish, always shown alive and often in dual form, represents Christ, who offers himself as the symbolic meal. Christ came to be associated with the fish primarily through the imagery of the miracle of loaves and fishes, another convenient way for the early Christians to secretly represent the Eucharist. It's also related to a title of Christ, Jesus Christ, Son of God Savior. When the first Greek letters of this title are combined, they spell ichthos, or ichthos, I-C-H-T-H-O-S, which is the Greek word for fish. The environment of fish, that from which it comes, is water. And in Christian terms, this means Christ coming from Mother Mary, or Bina, who is often called the Stella Maris and the Great Sea. The astrological sign attributed to the Hebrew letter, or the Hebrew word Nun, letter Nun, is Scorpio, and is symbolized in 3 ways: the scorpion, the serpent, or the eagle. This is the transition on the path of death from the dangerous creature which poisons and crawls upon the earth to the serpent which weaves its way, which is a reference to the astral light upward, to become the eagle which soars above all heads. Crowley used all 3 of these symbols. His skeleton has the scorpion and serpent and the feet of an eagle behind the head. Most suggestive is that the serpent wraps around the fish. This is a circular swirling activity of movement which the Sefer Yetzirah describes as the attribute of the Hebrew letter Nun. In this context, movement means change, continual transformation, which is the skeletal pattern of the universe, that on which all else is predicated. So before I continue, I just want to say, look, this card, or change, is something that a lot of us, I think I was just listening to Liam Thomas Christopher's video. I don't know if it was about fear or psychic vampires. I forget which one it was, but he talked about how we try to avoid change because almost as if we're afraid to die. But to avoid change in all actuality is to die, really. You're not living. Because the one constant in life is change and transformation. In fact, you'll notice that it's our behaviors to try to hold on and maintain any form of stability while everything seems to change around us. But to really live is to embrace change and transformation. In the beginnings, like the scorpion, we try to selfishly manipulate and do dark things to make sure, we'll even do dark stuff to make sure it don't happen, right? We get extremely self-centered. But that's only because we're afraid. Even then, we try to manipulate things. We try to weave our way through stuff until we embrace the spiritual journey. Once we embrace that spiritual journey, then the only weaving and manipulating we're doing is trying to make it through the astral light. We're not really trying to do it to other people or manipulate other humans or ourselves or even magically manipulate things anymore. There's kind of a, I would say a surrendering that needs to happen here. Because in my opinion, I've spent so much time in, I guess you could say, the psychological bardo. And that is because I've refused change and transformation, not only in myself, but in my surrounding and just all kinds of things. Just refuse to change. And that, my friends, is what puts you in a state of stagnation. So when Liam Thomas Christopher says, look, I don't think you're really living until you embrace change, because that's what life is all about, is change and transformation. On a deeper level, it's inevitable. But even in life, if you can embrace it, that's really living. Just saying, a little food for thought there. Now, so in the context, though, of the Sefer Yetzirah, movement means change, continual transformation, which is the skeletal pattern of the universe, which everything is built upon. So movement is the primary activity of the Mars force. Remember, Mars rules action and movement. That also is the ancient ruler of Scorpio. And as Mars is involved, so are Death, the Tower, and the fifth Sephirah Geburah. Moreover, the Emperor is this Mars energy during the daylight, while Death is the same energy in the dark of night. This is, again, the darkness of unknowing, the dark night of the soul, described by St. John of the Cross. What he says of this condition applies to the devil, temperance, and death. Although this happy night brings darkness to the spirit, it does so only to give it light in everything, and that although it humbles it and makes it miserable, it does so only to exalt it and to raise it up. And although it impoverishes it and empties it of all natural affection and attachment, it does so only that it may enable it to stretch forward divinely, and thus to have fruition and experience all things both above and below. His reference to the loss of natural affection and attachment is a comment on the diminishing of the desire nature of the personality. There develops, in fact, a dreadful emptiness, almost a complete disinterest in everything, even concerning whether one lives or dies. Now, we've all had these dark nights of the soul, right? Where, we're not chasing our sexual desires. We're not chasing our career desires. We're not even chasing our spiritual desires. It seems sometimes in life we can get so depressed or so down that life loses its meanings. But sometimes these things need to happen. Dark nights of the soul or life crises, whatever you call them, because a growth is about to happen. Life's processes sometimes cease to hold any value. Yet with this feeling, one pushes ahead, almost mechanically, but with great faith. The soul moves forward inch by inch, and an indescribable blackness, which is the dark night or the putrefaction, in the belief, and not always so sure, that the light will eventually appear to lead the way. Yeah, this is where you get extremely faith tested, because now you don't have a choice. You have to keep moving forward or physically die. You don't have a choice. All that is involved relates to the sexual energies. Scorpio rules the sexual organs as Mars rules Scorpio. It is the reproductive energy which is consciously directed in practical exercises such as that of the middle pillar. Crowley's version of death best indicates this activity. Now, I've got the Golden Dawn card here, but I could only find a fuzzy one on the internet, and I apologize, but you can make out the symbols. I'm sorry. I could only find a small one. I couldn't find a one that was blown up. But I actually have this deck. I just don't know where it is. So I could have took a picture of that. But now here's the Golden Dawn ones. The Golden Dawn card's quite traditional with two exceptions. First, the Eagle of Scorpio is at the upper right, changing from the form of the fiery serpent. Opposite this is the darkened sun, which is intended to represent the process of putrefaction from which spiritual gold will eventually emerge. It is also the Christian darkness at noon. Waite's departure from tradition, which Arthur Edward Waite, let's pull up his card, there we go. Waite's departure from tradition, showing death as a mounted skeleton and armor, represents another aspect of the path, which is its warrior quality. Here, Waite has drawn on medieval representations of death, depicting him as the Black Knight. Behind him is the fallen king of matter, and before him, a bishop and fish head, I guess, get up there, supposedly intended to indicate the passing of the Piscean age. The rising sun behind the dual towers, first seen on the path of the moon, is also a reference to resurrection, the conquest of death. Finally, and most interesting in this version, is the banner with the white rose of 10 petals, 5 inner and 5 outer. Insofar as the rose is based on 5, it's a reference to the Martian force of Gabura. But the totality of the 10 petals means the involvement of the entire universe under Kether because of its white color. This also means the Fool and Uranus, to which the white rose is related. Pretty cool. So, no one really talks about that rose, do they? I mean, no one really talks about all the deeper symbols of these cards anyways. They just say when you pull up some tarot or whatever online, it's like it's death, it's a transformation, or somebody physically died. Well, what does this rose mean? Why is he wearing this getup, right? Or what about these 2 towers back here, the 2 towers of the moon now showing the sun coming up? Why does it have 5 petals, 5 on 5? It's the moving force of transformation, right? Like that's happening. Death is like, this is inevitable. I mean, this is stuff that we're going to have to go through, kicking and screaming or not. I mean, there's other stuff that he didn't really talk about, like what's up with the kneeling people here. Wang didn't really talk about that, but we get it, right? So that's pretty much what Wang has to say. Now, before we get into Paul Foster Case, let's look a little bit deeper at Crowley's card here. Better to do that with Lon Malo Duquette, right? Again, Lon agrees with all of the correspondences: the child of the great transformers, the lord of the gate of death, the zodiacal trump of Scorpio, Mars ruled, Pluto exalted, a skeleton mowing down men. The scythe handle is a Tav. I didn't see that part. Did you? Tree of Life Path 24, joining Tifereth, Beauty to Nutsak Victory. The colors are green, blue, dull brown, very dark brown, and livid indigo brown. Well, let's just see here. We have the colored worlds. Yeah. I don't see an indigo brown, but lots of browns here. Right here. 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 That energy represented in each world. Pretty cool. All right, back to the Crowley card. Here is a quotation. The universe is change. Every change is the effect of an act of love. All acts of love contain pure joy. Die daily. Death is the apex of one curve of the snake life. Behold all opposites as necessary complements and rejoice. In Hamlet, Marcellus tells Horatio, quote, something is rotten in the state of Denmark, end quote. He might just as easily have said, quote, something smells fishy. Both statements are uncannily appropriate when the subject is the death card. The Hebrew letter assigned to death is nun, which means fish. The fish is one of the most revered symbols of tenacious life and resurrection in the traditions of Western civilization. Dead fish decay quickly and smell terrible in Denmark and everywhere else. But the secret of life is in the stinky stuff. I love how Lon Malo Duquette writes. It's so cool. It's very difficult to discuss the death card without also discussing the next trump, art. So from an alchemical point of view, death really should come from art. And that's temperance in other decks. Or from the not so simple reason that temperance or art foreshadows the final stage of the great work. Death is the final stage itself. Even though it's not pictured in the death card, our snake-wrapped Orphic egg, the Latin seed of life that we first saw in the Magus card, whose elements were married in the lovers, and which then was fertilized by the hermit, is now entering the last stage of development before hatching into new life. In a way, temperance or the art card actually incorporates the death card in its imagery. If you turn forward a few pages and look at the illustration of the art card, you will see an androgynous figure pouring fire and water upon the heads of a lion and an eagle and then into a great cauldron. And if you look closely at that cauldron, you will see the image of a raven perched upon a human skull. Lady Harris may as well have painted a sign on the cauldron that reads, "This is the cauldron," or "This cauldron is the death card." There's a typo there. So the emblem of the raven and skull is called the caput mortem and indicates the alchemical process that takes place inside the cauldron. That process is putrefaction, and putrefaction is what the death card is all about. I said putrefaction or putrefaction before. So in alchemy, this card explains the idea of putrefaction, the technical name given by its adepts to the series of chemical changes which develops the final form of life from the original latent seed in the Orphic egg. So things may be rotten in Denmark, but in the alchemy of tarot, the stink of the putrefaction is the sweet smell of impending success. It is a threefold process that gently warms the Orphic egg during its last most sensitive phase before birth. If we were to look into the cauldron, we would see that the process bubbling away as a scorpion, a serpent, and an eagle, the three images and aspects of Scorpio. The scorpion is found in the lower right corner of the death card and symbolizes, according to Crowley, the lowest aspect of Scorpio. The lowest is symbolized by a scorpion, which was supposed by early observers of nature to commit suicide when finding itself ringed with fire or otherwise in a desperate situation. This represents putrefaction in its lowest form. The strain of environment has become intolerable, and the attacked element willingly subjects itself to change. The middle aspect of Scorpio, Crowley explains, is represented as a serpent, which can be seen in the lower left corner. The serpent is sacred, lord of life and death, and its method of progression suggests the rhythmical undulation of those twin phases of life, which we call respectively life and death. And the third symbol of Scorpio is the eagle that we see in the upper left corner of the card. Crowley describes the eagle like this. The highest aspect of the card is the eagle, which represents exaltation above solid matter. It was understood by the early chemists that in certain experiments, the purest, the most tenuous elements present were given off as a gas or vapor. So when all three of these aspects of putrefaction are in turn allowed to unfold perfectly, they generate the gentle heat necessary to incubate the Orphic egg in its final stage of development. Man, there's a lot in these cards, isn't there? The death card of the Thoth Tarot is the antithesis of those found in traditional pacts. This is no stiff, grim reaper standing on the earth, indiscriminately mowing down people, young and old, humble and highborn. This death is vivacious and flexible. He wears the crown of Osiris and dances madly on the bottom of the sea. Instead of mowing down the living, he uses his tool to stir up bubbles of new lives from out of the seemingly dead and decaying sediment. So also, Crowley observes, the formula of continued life is death or putrefaction. Death is thus, in truth, the original secret male creative God. The original secret male creative God. Interesting way to put it. Now, again, I like Crowley's card, but I'm going to say, Paul Foster Case's card is my favorite here. I don't know why. Maybe it's the colors. I mean, Crowley's deck seems to be more artistic, but Paul Foster Case's card really stands out here because this skeleton is smiling. Y'all notice that? Pretty interesting that it's having a laugh, it looks like. All right, let's get into Paul Foster Case because we got some more correspondences here. All right. Death, the Roman number 8. The key number is 13. The Hebrew letter is Nun. The value of that letter is 50 or 700. The meaning or signification is fish or to sprout. The Kabbalistic intelligence is the imaginative intelligence. The power or aspect of consciousness is the law of dissolution and transformation. Astrology is Scorpio ruled by Pluto, exalted by Uranus. Now, some would say it's ruled by Mars, exalted by Pluto, but this is what Paul Foster Kay says. The human faculty is motion. The color is blue-green. The note is G. The path on the tree is the 24th path from Tiferet to Netzach. And the cube of space, and the cube of space, in the cube of space, it is southwest. And in alchemy, metallic alchemy, it is putrefaction. All right. Let's see what Paul Foster Case has to say about it. There are so many superstitions connected with the number 13 as a symbol of bad luck and disaster that you will not be surprised to find it connected with a tarot key entitled Death. But like so many things in occultism, we shall find upon close examination that this is again a judgment founded upon an appearance and superficial observation. Both the number and the title symbolize the law of transformation, which brings about dissolution and change. Most people have a great fear of change, not because change is usually adverse, but because its results are unknown. They fail to realize that without constant change, life could not exist, and that even if it could, the monotony of it would be unbearable. 13 is the number of two Hebrew words, Echad, meaning unity, and Ahiba, meaning love. The significance of this is that the unity, the one power from which all things proceed, is also the love power, which is the true cause of all attractions and affinities. We generally think of love power as chiefly concerned with reproduction, and as a matter of fact, to Key 13 is attributed the zodiacal sign that governs the reproductive organs. But the real meaning here is that it is the same love power that governs dissolution and the bodily change we call death. It governs both the beginning and the cessation of the bodily activities. This is important, and you will do well to ponder upon it. There are not two antagonistic powers, one making for life and the other for death. There is only one single power having twofold manifestations. Grasp of this truth is the first step towards right understanding. Man fears death because he does not understand the meaning of this transformation. Dissolution, says an occult maxim, is the secret of the great work. The dissolution of forms is imperative for growth. The breaking down of forms releases energy, which is utilized for further growth and development. Stone disintegrates to form soil, and from soil the vegetable kingdom springs. Animals eat the vegetables and incorporate their essences into a higher type of organization. Man eats both animal and vegetable forms and builds chemical energy in their cells into his own body. And if he learns a secret which is available for all who have ears to hear and are willing to work, man does more than this. He liberates himself from the conditions of physical existence, and by doing so becomes a master of the various energies which build his organism. When he has achieved this mastery, he is able to maintain his physical body for many years beyond the ordinary span of human life. Here we go, some deep alchemy stuff right here. Furthermore, he is able to disintegrate it at will and to reintegrate it again. This is an amazing statement, and it sounds utterly preposterous to the average person. Possibly it is expecting too much to suppose that you will accept this teaching at the present stage of your progress. But, whether you accept it or not, be sure that you know what this teaching is, because when you have put yourself in a position to examine the evidence for the doctrine, you will undoubtedly be fully persuaded that it is no extravagant or fanciful claim. More than that, you will ascertain its truth at first hand by performing the experiments that will bring it about. As a matter of fact, you're beginning those experiments now with this instruction. You've been taught what is necessary is for you to form the right kind of mental images. You must visualize yourself as having a body that readily responds to the power of will which you express. Your clear image of such a changed organism, which will be a perfect and beautiful body both in function and appearance, will have the suggestive power which subconsciousness will accept. Then, it will proceed to bring about the desired transformations. You do not need to tell it how to do these things, for it already knows that far better than you do. Tell it what you want accomplished and make your picture as clear and concrete as you can. Thus will man eventually triumph over physical death, but he has already triumphed over death because man does not die. It is impossible to present this tremendous mass of concrete evidence which is available upon this subject, and suffice it to say that it is an ascertainable fact which anyone with a little time and interest can prove to his own satisfaction. At least he can prove existence beyond the state that we call death. But ageless wisdom declares that man is immortal and can never die. Though his bodies change and disintegrate 1,000 times, he nevertheless remains. If this were not so, the very meaning of life would be non-existent. You are approaching the time when you will know this to be a fact, as others who have preceded you upon the path of enlightenment now know it. Ooh, pretty profound stuff there. The Hebrew letter nun, pronounced noon, as in morning, noon, night, means fish as a noun, and to grow or to propagate as a verb. The fish has for centuries been a symbol of Christ, which is the immortal principle in every one of us. It is only as we grow to the measure of the fullness of the stature of Christ that we approach anything like a comprehension of life. The moment of superconsciousness or true self-realization is mystically called the birth of the Christ child in every individual. The idea of a fish is closely related to the other idea of propagation, since fish are among the most prolific breeders. It has been estimated that the offspring of a single pair of codfish, if they arrived at maturity, would fill the Atlantic Ocean from shore to shore. This idea of propagation is fully intimated by the attribution of the zodiacal sign Scorpio to this key. Scorpio is the sign that rules the reproductive organs. Here, we have the strongest kind of hint that the force used in reproduction has a great deal to do with the liberating, transforming powers of dissolution discussed earlier in this lesson. Do not be misled by this intimation. It has nothing to do with the pseudo-occultism that is behind the formation of It has nothing to do with the pseudo-occultism that is behind the formation of many free love cults. What we're speaking of here is a force, and this force is ordinarily utilized in the reproduction of species. It may be utilized for much higher purposes, though. It may be used to change your consciousness so that you will know yourself to be immortal. Not believe, but know. It may also be used to control the metabolism of your body that you can renew it continually, or if you so desire, dissolve it instantaneously, and as instantaneously reconstitute it again. Now be careful not to get any false notions into your head concerning this. We are not suggesting any abnormal restraint of the sex functions, nor any enforced celibacy. Any special instructions along this line are always forthcoming when the student is ready for them. At present, you are receiving information in order that your subconsciousness may help you to advance to the stage where you're ready for more practical work. Remember, purity of thought and action are important, for without them you cannot advance. For the rest, the instruction you are now receiving is all that is necessary for you at this time. Now, Scorpio is ruled by Mars, and it is the Mars force in the human organism to which we have been referring. Mars is the ruler of Aries, represented by key 4, which rules the head and brain. Aries is called the day house of Mars, while Scorpio is its night house. This is a clear suggestion that when the Mars force is raised so that it energizes certain brain centers, it brings one into the daylight of enlightenment and truth. According to modern astrology, Uranus is exalted in Scorpio. In tarot, Uranus is typified by the Fool, which you have learned to represent superconsciousness. Thus, in man, the highest expression of the Uranian influence is that which results in the state of consciousness that brings first-hand knowledge of immorality. I think that's supposed to say immortality. And this state is brought about through the activity of the power. Y'all ready for this? That's what I've been saying all along. This state of immortality is brought about through the activity of the power of love. Not lust, love. Scorpio is the eighth sign of the zodiac and has what astrologers sometimes term fundamental rulership over the eighth house of the horoscope, which is the house of death and inheritances. This one fact is sufficient to indicate the real correspondence between the 13th key and the sign of Scorpio. But we must take the hint conveyed by the fact that death and inheritance are both represented by the eighth sign. And he has this in big, big letters and bold. Our most precious heritage is the power which ordinarily manifests itself in death. The very power which, because we misunderstand it, results in sickness and death, is the power whereby we may experience perpetual health and immortality. The power is the power of life and growth to all who know and obey its law. Only to those who disobey it and its instrument of death, it is, well, when you disobey it, it will become the instrument of death and destruction. Ponder the connection between that which is represented by the eighth sign of the zodiac and that which is represented by key 8. There is a very basic and important connection between the two, which you should be at some pains to discover. In the design, the skeleton is, on the surface, the conventional picture of the Grim Reaper. Actually, it conveys to the eye of the initiated a reminder that the bony structure of the body is the foundation of its very motion. It is because our muscles are attached to our bones that we can walk, move our hands and feet, and so on. Even the involuntary muscles have their connections with the skeleton and could not move otherwise. Thus, what is shown here is really the basis of all of our bodily activities. Symbolically, therefore, it stands for that which is the indispensable basis of all function, of all growth, and all development. That something is the one power specialized in the reproductive functions of the body. This power is the seed power, and it is to this that the conventionalized picture of a seed placed in the upper left-hand corner of the picture refers. Note that this little seed is composed of 2 ovals, that is, one of 2 zeros. From the smaller oval, 5 rays extend to the limits of the larger one, and the 2 ovals are united, or really one. Here is a simple hieroglyphic of the whole process of manifestation. The inner and smaller oval is the source of radiant energy, differentiated as ether, fire, air, water, and earth. You will learn more about the inner meanings of these elements in the later instructions. But this energy fills the space enclosed by the large oval, which, remember, is one with the small oval. Here we have expressed a fundamental doctrine of ageless wisdom, namely that an inner power projects itself, or a seeming extension of itself, as space, the larger oval, and fills that space with the forms of energy whose combination constitutes the body of the universe. I'm going to say that again. This energy fills the space enclosed by the large oval, which, remember, is one with the small oval. Here we have expressed a fundamental doctrine of ageless wisdom, namely, that an inner power projects itself, or a seeming extension of itself, as space, the larger oval, and fills that space with the forms of energy whose combination constitutes the body of the universe. Write that in your notebook and spend some time with it. Eventually, you will come to the point where you will understand that it is a concise and accurate statement of the way the universe comes into being. There are 2 details about this skeleton which will probably arrest the attention of any artist or anatomist who happens to see the picture. The figure is twisted at 2 points, one just above the pelvis and the other at the throat. Now, this would be obvious if the skeleton was covered with flesh, for it would then be in a position that few contortionists could imitate. But the meaning of this strange position is that the force here symbolized must be twisted or reversed to perform its highest function. He's given you the secrets of the card he created. The skeleton walks from north to south, from the darkness of ignorance to the light of perfection. He represents the framework of all progress, the disintegration of form for the sake of releasing energy. The handle of the scythe is in the form of the letter T, referring to the ideas represented by key 21. The blade is in the shape of a crescent and refers to the powers of the subconsciousness, of which the moon is a symbol, and thus the blade is related to key 2. It is made of steel, which is a form of the metal assigned to Mars. Mars is also symbolized by the red background of this key. The river flows towards the sun, and it starts in the north and makes a bend so that it flows eastward. This brings out an important part of this symbolism as well. Ordinarily, the idea of death would be connected with the setting sun, but in this key, the sun is rising. This clearly indicates that the power we see as death is really the power of life. Every dissolution of form means the birth of a new one. The rising sun is particularly connected with the letter Daleth and all of the symbolism of the Empress. A little thought upon this relationship will give you deeper insight to the inner meanings of key 12. Notice in this connection that the digits of the number 12 add up to 3. The rising sun then refers to the dawn of higher consciousness in the state of samadhi, typified by the hanged man. It is this dawn of a new order of knowing which is behind the transformation shown in key 13. The white rose refers to the planet Uranus and has the same meanings as that in the hand of the fool. The small plants refer to the idea of growth and the meanings of key 3. The woman's head at the left of the picture is a symbol of understanding for reasons that will become apparent when you take up the study of Kabbalistic tree of life. Remember, understanding is Bina, the divine feminine, in the motherly form. The man's head represents wisdom, or chokma, and also beauty. 3 hands are shown. 2 are active and 1 is passive. The active hands represent the new works which result from the transformation indicated by this key. The passive hands represents Yod, the great hand, of which we become aware in the higher order of knowing. Only 1 foot is shown because this picture refers to the end of the Piscean age, and the sign Pisces rules the feet. For this reason also the rising sun represents the dawn of the new era, the age of Aquarius. This week, give a great deal of thought to the idea of dissolution and change. Note how much it is a part of your daily life. Learn to welcome change and overcome your fear of it. The future can hold only that which you have earned, in strict conformity with your past actions and that which you are now engaged in creating. The one you cannot help. Face it without fretting about it. The other is in your own hands. See to it that your future is conformity with the ideas of growth and transformation represented in this key. Let not the face of change be your enemy. The Bhagavad Gita says, quote, "The wise in heart mourn neither those that live nor those that die. Nor I, nor thou, nor any of these ever was not, nor ever will not be. Forever and forever afterwards, all that doth live, lives always." To man's frame as there come infancy, youth, and age, so come their raisings up and laying downs of other life abodes, which the wise know and fear not. This is the philosophy of all who have wisdom and understanding, for they perceive that herein lies beauty. Wow. Man, that is a pretty deep thing, Paul. This is why I love Paul Foster Case. One, I mean, he's talking about some pretty big secrets of the energy of this card. This card represents a lot. But, the alchemy of the ageless wisdom and talking about living longer years and prepping the body and having that perfect body and all the stuff having to do with this energy. Before we get to all of that, learning the secrets of all that stuff and accepting it, it's very hard pressed to get there without learning to accept change. To no longer fear death. And remember, fear is failure and the forerunner of failure. This doesn't just mean to learn to overcome the fear of the death of the body, but the death of your individual personality, too. The death of all things, the change of things in your life. Times when you become most comfortable and when you feel most safe and most comfortable and all this other stuff, can change at any moment. The people in your life are there 1 minute, sometimes they're gone. I like how he said that one of the biggest keys of this is love, despite what we all may think about the sexual energies. I like how he said that. If you guys want to, I don't know, something crazy just happened. I think my whole power stopped or something. But anyways, if you guys want to check all this stuff out, you can check out Robert Wang's books, which I have links for all those books that I get this stuff from. Also, Lon Duquette's Understanding the Thoth Tarot, and Paul Foster Case's text too, which is the Tarot Key to the Wisdom of the Ages, or Wisdom of the Tarot. All right, y'all. I hope y'all have learned a little bit more about this card with me. It was fun to study it with you, and we'll see you on the next card. Thanks for listening.